Welcome to Slothful Slumber, the podcast where we transform the vast knowledge of the internet into a gentle lullaby for your mind. I'm your host, Luna Dreamwell, and I'm here to guide you on a journey to tranquility through the soothing cadence of Wikipedia articles. Each episode will delve into the most wonderfully mundane and sleep-inducing topics, helping you drift off into a realm of serene dreams. So find your comfortable space, close your eyes, and let the dull hum of information carry you into a restful slumber. Now, let's embark on tonight's voyage of tranquil learning as we explore a topic so peacefully uneventful, it just might whisk you away to the land of dreams. This Wikipedia article is titled Space Station. A space station is a spacecraft capable of supporting a human crew in orbit for an extended period of time and is therefore a type of space habitat. It lacks major propulsion or landing systems. An orbital station or an orbital space station is an artificial satellite, that is, a type of orbital spaceflight. Stations must have docking ports to allow other spacecraft to dock to transfer crew and supplies. The purpose of maintaining an orbital outpost varies depending on the program. Space stations have most often been launched for scientific purposes, but military launches have also occurred. Space stations have harbored so far the only long-duration direct human presence in space. After the first station, Salyut 1, 1971, and the deaths of its Soyuz 11 crew, space stations have been operated consecutively since Skylab 1973, having allowed a progression of long-duration direct human presence in space. Stations have been occupied by consecutive crews since 1987 with the Salyut successor, Mir. Uninterrupted occupation of stations has been achieved since the operational transition from the Mir to the ISS, with its first occupation in 2000. The ISS has hosted the highest number of people in orbit at the same time, reaching 13 for the first time during the 11-day docking of STS-127 in 2009. On May 30th, 2023, there were 11 people on the ISS and 6 on the China's Tiangong, making 17 people in orbit, record number as of 2023. As of 2023, there are 2 fully operational space stations in low Earth orbit, LEO, the International Space Station, ISS, and China's Tiangong Space Station, TSS. The ISS has been permanently inhabited since October 2000, with the Expedition 1 cruise, and the TSS began continuous inhabitation with the Shenzhou 14 cruise in June 2022. These stations are used to study the effects of spaceflight on the human body, as well as to provide a location to conduct a greater number and longer length of scientific studies than is possible on other space vehicles. In 2022, the TSS finished its Phase 1 construction with the addition of 2 lab modules. Wentian, Quest for the Heavens, launched on the 24th of July 2022, and Mengxian, Dreaming of the Heavens, launched on the 31st of October 2022, joining the ISS as the most recent space station operating in orbit. In July 2022, Russia announced intentions to withdraw from the ISS after 2024 in order to build its own space station. There have been numerous decommissioned space stations, including the USSR's Salyuts, Russia's Mir, NASA's Skylab, and China's Tiangong-1 and Tiangong-2. History. Starting with the ill-fated flight of the Soyuz 11 crew to Salyut 1, all recent human spaceflight duration records have been set aboard space stations. The duration record for a single spaceflight is 437.75 days, set by Valery Polyakov aboard Mir from 1994 to 1995. As of 2021, 4 cosmonauts have completed single missions of over a year, all aboard Mir. The last military-use space station was the Soviet Salyut 5, which was launched under the Almaz program and orbited between 1976 and 1977. Early concepts. The first mention of anything resembling a space station occurred in Edward Everett Hale's 1869 The Brick Moon. The first to give serious, scientifically grounded consideration to space stations were Konstantin Tsiolkovsky and Hermann Oberth, about 2 decades apart in the early 20th century. In 1929, Hermann Potocznik's The Problem of Space Travel was published, the first to envision a rotating wheel space station to create artificial gravity. Conceptualized during the Second World War, the Sun Gun was a theoretical orbital weapon orbiting Earth at a height of 8,200 kilometers, 5,100 miles. No further research was ever conducted. In 1951, Werner von Braun published a concept for a rotating wheel space station in Collier's Weekly, referencing Potocznik's idea. However, development of a rotating station was never begun in the 20th century. Salyut, Almaz, and Skylab. In 1971, the Soviet Union developed and launched the world's first space station, Salyut 1. The Almaz and Salyut series were eventually joined by Skylab, Mir, and Tiangong-1 and Tiangong-2. The hardware developed during the initial Soviet efforts remains in use, with evolved variants comprising a considerable part of the ISS, orbiting today. Each crew member stays aboard the station for weeks or months, but rarely more than a year. Early stations were monolithic designs that were constructed and launched in one piece, generally containing all their supplies and experimental equipment. A crew would then be launched to join the station and perform research. After the supplies had been used up, the station was abandoned. The first space station was Salyut 1, which was launched by the Soviet Union on April 19, 1971. The early Soviet stations were all designated Salyut, but among these there were 2 distinct types, civilian and military. The military stations, Salyut 2, Salyut 3, and Salyut 5, were also known as Almaz stations. The civilian stations, Salyut 6 and Salyut 7, were built with 2 docking ports, which allowed a second crew to visit, bringing a new spacecraft with them. The Soyuz ferry could spend 90 days in space, at which point it needed to be replaced by a fresh Soyuz spacecraft. This allowed for a crew to man the station continually. The American Skylab, 1973 to 1979, was also equipped with 2 docking ports, like second-generation stations, but the extra port was never used. The presence of a second port on the new stations allowed Progress supply vehicles to be docked to the station, meaning that fresh supplies could be brought to aid long-duration missions. This concept was expanded on Salyut 7, which hard-docked with a TKS tug shortly before it was abandoned, This served as a proof of concept for the use of modular space stations. The later Salyots may reasonably be seen as a transition between the two groups. Mir. Unlike previous stations, the Soviet space station Mir had a modular design. A core unit was launched, and additional modules, generally with a specific role, were later added to that. This method allows for greater flexibility in operation, as well as removing the need for a single, immensely powerful launch vehicle. Modular stations are also designed from the outset to have their supplies provided by logistical support craft, which allows for a longer lifetime at the cost of requiring regular support launches. International Space Station. The ISS is divided into two main sections: the Russian Orbital Segment, ROS, and the U.S. Orbital Segment, USOS. The first module of the International Space Station, Zarya, was launched in 1998. The Russian Orbital Segment's second-generation modules were able to launch on Proton, fly to the correct orbit, and dock themselves without human intervention. Connections are automatically made for power, data, gases, and propellants. The Russian autonomous approach allows the assembly of space stations prior to the launch of crew. The Russian second-generation modules are able to be reconfigured to suit changing needs. As of 2009, RKK Energia was considering the removal and reuse of some modules of the ROS on the Orbital Piloted Assembly and Experiment Complex after the end of mission is reached for the ISS. However, in September 2017, the head of Roscosmos said that the technical feasibility of separating the station to form OPASEC had been studied, and there were now no plans to separate the Russian segment from the ISS. In contrast, the main U.S. modules launched on the Space Shuttle and were attached to the ISS by crews during EVAs. Connections for electrical power, data, propulsion, and cooling fluids are also made at this time, resulting in an integrated block of modules that is not designed for disassembly and must be deorbited as one mass. The Axiom Orbital Segment is a planned commercial segment to be added to the ISS starting in the mid-2020s. Axiom Space gained NASA approval for the venture in January 2020. Up to 3 Axiom modules will attach to the International Space Station. The first module could be launched no later than 2024 and will be docked to the forward port of Harmony, requiring relocation of the PMA-2. Axiom Space plans to attach up to 2 additional modules to its first core module and send private astronauts to inhabit the modules. The modules could one day detach into the Axiom Station in a manner similar to Russia's proposed OPASEC Tiangong program. China's first space laboratory, Tiangong-1, was launched in September 2011. The uncrewed Shenzhou 8 then successfully performed an automatic rendezvous and docking in November 2011. The crewed Shenzhou 9 then docked with Tiangong-1 in June 2012, followed by the crewed Shenzhou 10 in 2013. According to the China Manned Space Engineering Office, Tiangong-1 re-entered over the South Pacific Ocean, northwest of Tahiti, on the 2nd of April 2018 at 0:15 UTC. A second space laboratory, Tiangong-2, was launched in September 2016, while a plan for Tiangong-3 was merged with Tiangong-2. The station made a controlled re-entry on the 19th of July 2019 and burned up over the South Pacific Ocean. The Tiangong Space Station, Chinese for Heavenly Palace, the first module of which was launched on the 29th of April 2021, is in low Earth orbit, 340 to 450 kilometers above the Earth at an orbital inclination of 42 degrees to 43 degrees. Its planned construction via 11 total launches across 2021 to 22 is intended to extend the core module with 2 laboratory modules, capable of hosting up to 6 crew. Architecture. 2 types of space stations have been flown, monolithic and modular. Monolithic stations consist of a single vehicle and are launched by one rocket. Modular stations consist of 2 or more separate vehicles that are launched independently and docked on orbit. Modular stations are currently preferred due to lower costs and greater flexibility. A space station is a complex vehicle that must incorporate many interrelated subsystems, including structure, electrical power, thermal control, attitude determination and control, orbital navigation and propulsion, automation and robotics, computing and communications, environmental and life support, crew facilities, and crew and cargo transportation. Stations must serve a useful role, which drives the capabilities required. Materials. Space stations are made from durable materials that have to weather space radiation, internal pressure, micrometeoroids, and thermal effects of the sun and cold temperatures for very long periods of time. They are typically made from stainless steel, titanium, and high-quality aluminum alloys, with layers of insulation, such as Kevlar, as a ballistic shield protection. The International Space Station has a single inflatable module, the Bigelow Expandable Activity Module, which was installed in April 2016 after being delivered to the ISS on the SpaceX CRS-8 resupply mission. This module, based on NASA research in the 1990s, weighed 1,400 kilograms, 3,100 pounds, and was transported while compressed before being attached to the ISS by the space station arm and inflated to provide a 16 cubic meters, 21 cubic yards volume. Whilst it was initially designed for a 2-year lifetime, it was still attached and being used for storage in August 2022. Construction. Salyut 1, first space station, launched in 1971. Skylab, launched in a single launch in May 1973. First modular space station assembled in orbit. International Space Station. Modular space station assembled in orbit. Tiangong Space Station, Chinese Space Station. Habitability. The space station environment presents a variety of challenges to human habitability, including short-term problems such as the limited supplies of air, water, and food, and the need to manage waste heat, and long-term ones such as weightlessness and relatively high levels of ionizing radiation. These conditions can create long-term health problems for space station inhabitants, including muscle atrophy, bone deterioration, balance disorders, eyesight disorders, and elevated risk of cancer. Future space habitats may attempt to address these issues and could be designed for occupation beyond the weeks or months that current missions typically last. Possible solutions include the creation of artificial gravity by a rotating structure, the inclusion of radiation shielding, and the development of on-site agricultural ecosystems. Some designs might even accommodate large numbers of people, becoming essentially cities in space, where people would reside semi-permanently. Molds that develop aboard space stations can produce acids that degrade metal, glass, and rubber. Despite an expanding array of molecular approaches for detecting microorganisms, rapid and robust means of assessing the differential viability of the microbial cells as a function of phylogenetic lineage remain elusive. Power. Like uncrewed spacecraft close to the Sun, space stations in the inner solar system generally rely on solar panels to obtain power. Life support, space station air and water is brought up in spacecraft from Earth before being recycled. Supplemental oxygen can be supplied by a solid fuel oxygen generator. Occupation. Space stations have harbored so far the only long-duration direct human presence in space. After the first station, Salyut 1, 1971, and its tragic Soyuz 11 crew, space stations have been operated consecutively since Skylab, 1973 to 1974, having allowed a progression of long-duration direct human presence in space. Long-duration resident crews have been joined by visiting crews since 1977, Salyut 6, and stations have been occupied by consecutive crews since 1987 with the Salyut successor Mir. Uninterrupted occupation of stations has been achieved since the operational transition from the Mir to the ISS, with its first occupation in 2000. The ISS has hosted the highest number of people in orbit at the same time, reaching 13 for the first time during the 11-day docking of STS-127 in 2009. Operations. Resupply and crew vehicles. Many spacecraft are used to dock with the space stations. Soyuz Flight T-15 in March to July 1986 was the first and, as of 2016, only spacecraft to visit two different space stations, Mir and Salyut 7. International Space Station. The International Space Station has been supported by many different spacecraft. Future. Sierra Nevada, Corporation Dream Chaser. New Space Station Resupply Vehicle, HTV-X. Roscosmos Oral, Current, Northrop Grumman Cygnus 2013 present. Roscosmos Progress, multiple variants, 2000 to present. Energia Soyuz, multiple variants, 2001 to present. SpaceX Dragon 2, 2020 to present. Retired. Automated Transfer Vehicle, ATV, 2008 to 2015. H2 Transfer Vehicle, HTV, 2009 to 2020. Space Shuttle, 1998 to 2011. SpaceX Dragon, 2012 to 2020. Tiangong Space Station. The Tiangong Space Station is supported by the following spacecraft. Shenzhou, 2021 to present. Tianzhou, 2021 to present. Tiangong Program. The Tiangong program relied on the following spacecraft. Shenzhou Program, 2011 to 2016. Mir. The Mir space station was in orbit from 1986 to 2001 and was supported and visited by the following spacecraft. Roscosmos Progress, multiple variants, 1986 to 2000. An additional Progress spacecraft was used in 2001 to deorbit Mir. Energia Soyuz, multiple variants, 1986 to 2000. Space Shuttle, 1995 to 1998. Skylab, Apollo Command and Service Module, 1973 to 1974. Salyut Program, Energia Soyuz, multiple variants, 1971 to 1986. Research conducted on the Mir included the first long-term space-based ESA research project, Euromir 95, which lasted 179 days and included 35 scientific experiments. During the first 20 years of operation of the International Space Station, there were around 3,000 scientific experiments in the areas of biology and biotech, technology development, educational activities, human research, physical science, and earth and space science. Materials research. Space stations provide a useful platform to test the performance, stability, and survivability of materials in space. This research follows on from previous experiments, such as the Long-Duration Exposure Facility, a free-flying experimental platform which flew from April 1984 until January 1990. Mir Environmental Effects. Payload, 1996 to 1997. Materials International Space Station Experiment, 2001 to present. Space tourism. On the International Space Station, guests sometimes pay $50 million to spend the week living as an astronaut. Later, space tourism is slated to expand once launch costs are lowered sufficiently. By the end of the 2020s, space hotels may become relatively common. Finance. As it currently costs on average $10,000 to $25,000 per kilogram to launch anything into orbit, space stations remain the exclusive province of government space agencies, which are primarily funded via taxation. In the case of the International Space Station, space tourism makes up another chunk of money to run it.